Hello you guys, welcome back to another episode of I Watched It So You Don't Have To. This time around we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I have to ask, is this the best trilogy in the MCU? Still trying to process the loss of the Gamora he knew and loved, and the return of a very different Gamora, Peter Quill must pull himself and his team together to save one of their own. If the mission fails, it could lead to the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy as we know them. I love this story so much, you guys, and when I was writing my script, I was trying to figure out where to start this video off, but my mind kept going back to the story, so we've got to talk about that first. This story is incredible, and what a way to end a trilogy. There is so much that I love about this story, from the individual character arcs, their endings, and how true it all was to their story. I'm just really impressed, you guys. You might already know if you've watched my Thor Love and Thunder video. If you haven't watched it, that is totally fine. But in that video, I was talking about how heated I get at the treatment of Thor's trauma, the way it almost always ends up being a joke. And more often than not, elements like this, that trauma, that pain, is just glossed over or forgotten. So to see trauma, different types of trauma being acknowledged so clearly and how the characters accept and heal was such a surprise. I really love the dynamic between Gamora and all of the Guardians, Gamora and Quill, Rocket and his past, us finally seeing that past. It's painful and it's healing all at the same time. There's so much material that informs these characters and their relationships, so to see the story continued and to see how the movie ended, I'm about to answer my own question earlier than I want to. Getting away from the story real quick and touching on the camera work, I really enjoyed the camera work. There are moments where the camera work is unique with the way it follows the characters' movements or the action, and in those moments, the camera work really stands out. Something I enjoy about sci-fi and all of these movies is space. So I really love to see those wide shots, and the CGI in these moments, obviously it's CGI, but it looks really good. The movie actually looks really good overall, and the practical effects just send it over the top. I go on and on and on about practical effects a lot when I talk about movies, but in a world where there's just so much CGI, it's really cool to see the effort put in to come up with these designs, create them, and have them on set. Before we get into the acting, let's talk about the music. I don't really look into movies too much before I see them in theaters. So for this one, I didn't actually look at the soundtrack before watching the movie, and I was actually really surprised at some of the dates on the music. I really love the blend of some classics and newer, not even newer, time flies. Anyway, the blend of ages when it comes to the music was really engaging because it's kind of like what's going to play next. Additionally, it's always fun to hear music that you recognize recontextualized, and there were plenty of songs that I've never even heard before, but they were all so good and fit the movie really well. And here I am filming late because I grabbed the vinyl from Target, you guys. Now we can get into the acting, and bear with me because I might get into it a bit. Across the board, all of these actors did an incredible job. I really love how strong the characters' arcs are and to see the passion and heartbreak in the actors' performances. The chemistry just gets better and better with each installment, and there's so much nuance to their performances. Now, we have got to start with Bradley Cooper as Rocket. Unsurprisingly, spectacular. In my Suzume podcast exclusive, I mentioned how well the voice acting is and how well the acting is. I felt redundant, but what I really wanted to say is this is what I am talking about. The performance here behind the CGI is incredible because you can really see what they put into it, and that translates beautifully into what we hear. Bradley Cooper brings Rocket to life once again, and he brings even more layers to the character and to the story. I love the depth of range he brings and the subtleties he delivers. You guys know I love Zoe Saldana. She can do no wrong. As Gamora, she nailed the role again in a different way, and it was so jarring to see the character we've grown to love so much since 2014 be someone we barely recognize, but also someone we can recognize. Being that cold, hard and distant character, but having a glimmer of openness and a glimmer of that character that we love. Not only that, but I really love seeing how she communicated the complexities of being someone to someone you don't even know. Let's talk about Bautista. You guys know I love his acting, and in the Knock at the Cabin video, I went on and on about how he delivered, and this movie is no exception. Drax has always been a funny character with a deeper story that's mostly covered by that humor. So to see Bautista when he has the opportunity to give more range to this character is fantastic. From the funny moments to the deeper, more thoughtful moments he has, especially the moments he gets with Mantis. If you've been here for a minute, you know how I am with names. All I can do is do my best. I adore Pom Klementieff as Mantis. She is so endearing and fun to watch. Mantis is such a soft character, so to see those moments where she puts her foot down, particularly in those action scenes and those emotional scenes, really show the range of her character. Karen Gillan as Nebula, a babe. I really started to like Nebula during Volume 2, and to see Karen Gillan deliver a Nebula that's funny, warm, and part of a family, especially up against Gamora in this movie, is striking, and I love it. Moving away from the Guardians, let's talk about the worst character ever. The High Evolutionary. I want to throw hands just looking at this guy, so you know that means that the actor delivered an incredible performance. Chukwudi Iwuji absolutely delivered one of the best MCU villains. You've got those villains that are just opposite the hero. You've got the ones that are actually making sense and you understand them. But then there are the ones that are cruel, evil, scum of the universe, actual trash that no one likes. That's him. There wasn't a lot we got from the character, but Chukwudi Iwuji knocked it out of the park. Every single time he was on screen, I was apprehensive, and I will admit that it had everything to do with his disturbing treatment of CGI animals, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. He did such a spectacular job that really left me rattled because of how intense and cruel he was. Alright you guys, I watched it so you don't have to, but was it worth the watch? 1,000 times yes, and I can finally answer the question I asked at the top of the video. Is this the best trilogy in the MCU? This movie really resonated with me, you guys, in a way that surprised me. So in my opinion, not only is this the best trilogy in the MCU, this is the best movie in said trilogy and one of the best MCU movies. Definitely one of my top 5, if I had a top 5. I have a loose top 5, and it's up there. This movie is everything. It's emotionally overwhelming. I laughed, I cried. It pulls genuine emotions that are grounded in believable and real stories that you can identify with and connect with. There is a rare blend of humor and heart that all 3 of these movies have and that all 3 of these movies mastered. I'm not saying this movie is not without its issues. I'm not saying that this movie is perfect. I say this movie is in my top 5, but it barely made the top 20 on the MCU ranked movies list that Rotten Tomatoes has, and it's actually the lowest rated movie out of the trilogy. Me and Rotten Tomatoes, you guys, we're both right. I will say I've been seeing a lot of buzz about the visuals and the language, but for me, the bigger story, the character arcs, how those arcs were handled and respected really outweigh the negatives. If you're a fan of the MCU and you've been keeping up with everything so far, if you're looking for a fun sci-fi adventure movie, if you want to watch a movie with a fantastic soundtrack, if you want to watch a movie that's going to make you cry, it's going to make you laugh, or if you want to catch the Guardians' last hurrah, then you absolutely need to see this movie. If you're looking for a movie that you can just jump into and watch without having to watch anything else, if you're looking for a movie that's tonally similar to the previous 2 installments, or if you're just not interested in the MCU or comic book movies, then skip this one. Speaking of skipping this movie, I want to talk about the treatment of CGI animals, the stark tonal shift, as well as some heavy topics that this movie tackles. It is rough, you guys, and when I tell you I cried a lot. That kind of ugly crying that hurts your chest. If you've been around here for long enough, then you know I don't mind violence, murder, body horror, torture, all that good stuff when it comes to humans. Any human, that's fine. The more violence, the better. But the animals, absolutely the F not. I mean, for crying out loud, I use the website Does the Dog Die? If anything happens to the animals, I skip scenes or I cover my eyes. So I mean it when I say the treatment of CGI animals is appalling and the High Evolutionary can step on a Lego. Also, if you watch enough movies, then you know where the story is going. Then you get specific information early on, like Rocket saying that he didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over again. You know the history, you know what's going to happen. But to see it is another thing entirely. That said, the abuse and experimentation is explicit and very graphic. The only thing I can say is that it's obviously CGI, but that definitely didn't help me. The heartbreak is so visceral. It's CGI animals, you guys, and it might sound silly, but these characters are insanely easy to get attached to, so you have been warned. Moving on to the tonal shift. That shift is clear from the very beginning. The language is pushed throughout, and the movie is surprisingly graphic. The heavy topics include alcoholism briefly in the beginning, loss, coping with loss, trauma, and dealing with PTSD. There's honestly so much and so many different forms of trauma, I'm not even gonna try to list them all. I will say that I don't mind the language, violence, and a graphic movie. No one likes trauma, but as someone who, like so many people, has been through some things, it's nice to see the journey and the healing, especially to see it handled seriously and not just as a punchline. The tonal shift surprised me, and the most distressing element of this movie is the CGI animal treatment. So keep all of this in mind and do your own research if any of this bothers you, especially if you have little ones. As usual, when talking about one of these movies, you can't just jump in, and if you're new to the franchise, it's a lot to take on, so here's what you need to watch before joining the Guardians one last time. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. I pulled the list from a Polygon article that I will link below if you want to look into it, because they also listed Thor Love and Thunder, and I'll just say you don't have to put yourself through that movie if you haven't already watched it, if you're pressed for time, or you just don't want to watch it. So let's take a look at what you need to watch before going into this movie. Guardians of the Galaxy, of course. We're going to be introduced to the Guardians of the Galaxy before they become the family we know and love. We get the foundation of the Guardians, a lot of humor, heart, and history for some major characters, and for some characters we get a little bit more history than others, as well as information on the Infinity Stones. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 introduces so many new players, including Ego. We learn more about his character as well as Peter Quill's mother. Additionally, we get Mantis, Gamora, and Peter's relationship gets really cemented, as well as more development of the relationship between Gamora and Nebula. We're also introduced to the Sovereign and Adam Warlock. Infinity War not only expands Mantis's role, but there's that snap as well as the crucial moment of obtaining an Infinity Stone. Endgame is a lot, and it will never not be a lot, but it informs the relationship between Rocket and Nebula, as well as introducing 2014-era Gamora. The holiday special catches us up with the Guardians since the events of Endgame, and it's worth watching. It's fun and cute and really does a lot to strengthen the relationship between Mantis and Drax, as well as dropping some sibling information. The article says if you want to watch the bare minimum to just watch Volume 1 and Volume 2, do not do that. If you're pressed for time, sure, go ahead. But at the very least, read what happens in all the other movies or watch a video that explains everything, because there is so much that informs the story and these characters and their relationships beyond just the first two movies. If you are completely unfamiliar with the MCU, it is a lot to tackle, but small portions are key. These are the picks to watch before watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. You did click on the video, so I will say that no matter where you are on your MCU journey, we're all in this together. Okay, Guardians, that brings us to the end of the video where I watched it, so you don't have to. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you very much. I'm gonna leave a link to the podcast down below if you're watching here on YouTube. Leave the video a thumbs up if you like the video, so I know you liked the video. Comment down below, have you seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yet? If you've seen the movie, what did you think about it? Also, I have to ask, who is your favorite Guardian of the Galaxy? Or if you don't have one, which, you have to have one. I know one of them speaks to your soul. So if you don't have one, or even if you do, I want to know, who is your favorite character besides the Guardians? You could probably tell throughout the video, I don't know how much of my shirt you guys can see, but my favorite is Rocket. He's been my favorite since he was introduced. I use Rocket as a name on the internet a lot, from like my PlayStation ID, you guys, to social media. Initially, I was in love with the character design, but on top of that, I love how innovative, quick-witted, and entertaining he is. Also, you guys remember 2014, seeing a raccoon for the first time shooting a huge gun? It was awesome in 2014, and it's still awesome almost 10 years later. He's just a really cool character. Then we started to get more. We started to get hints about his past, his trauma, and then we get to follow his character through so much as he had to look inward, dealing with loss, and then to see it all come together in this movie, again, it is so healing. Characters that I love outside of the Guardians, it's gonna be the characters from Rocket's past, his friends, Lila, Teefs, and Floor. They immediately stole my heart, and they were all so easy to connect with in such a short amount of time. Also, I really love Cosmo. I think she's an awesome addition, and I really love to see more of her in this movie. She had several awesome moments, and the role she plays in this movie has me really interested to see the future of the character. If you've been here with me talking about movies for a minute, then you know I don't really talk about Chris Pratt, and when I do, I just gloss over him. I'm not here to talk about what he's done or the things that he said. You can do all of that research on your own. I really am just here because I want to talk about movies. But if anybody is worried about Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, he doesn't actually have that much screen time. He is there, and for the most part when he's on screen, he is with other characters. This is definitely a Rocket movie, but there is space for Peter Quill's character to have his journey, closure, and healing just as much as the rest of the Guardians. Overall, this is an incredible story, and it's so special to get a movie, let alone a trilogy in the MCU that is so strong and consistent. This is absolutely one of those movies that I feel can mean a lot to a lot of different people, and it's definitely a movie that I'm going to be thinking about for a very long time. Let me know your favorite Guardian, your favorite characters. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next movie that I'm going to be watching for you. This week, we're not actually going to the movies, but click the subscribe button anyway because we're about to tackle a streak of movies that I have been anticipating. It is all gas, no brakes. We're getting Fast X, Fast 10. The next installment in the fast and most consistently titled Furious franchise, which I read somewhere is actually a part 1, so I'm eager to see what I'm sure will be a wild and over-the-top movie with a jaw-dropping ending. These movies might not be the best, you guys, but they are so close to my heart that no matter how off the mark they get, I will be in the theater. Then we get The Little Mermaid. Should they be remaking all of these movies? Probably not the way that they're doing it, but I've been telling you guys, I am a Disney Renaissance baby. I'm eating all these movies up, good or bad. Then we get the sequel to one of the best Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Then we get Transformers Rise of the Beasts, and you guys, I've been waiting for these tickets to go on sale, and they finally did. I don't have tickets for anything else after that, but there are so many more movies that I'm looking forward to seeing this year. So I hope you'll join me here on YouTube and on the podcast for those exclusives. Speaking of exclusives, you guys, I finally watched Ghosted, and I'll talk to you guys on the podcast about that one next week. You can always check out the community tab here on YouTube or my Instagram for more updates. Thank you for hanging out with me, for watching, for listening. You can catch new episodes of I Watched It So You Don't Have to every Friday. But until the next episode, spread positivity, be safe, take care of yourself, and everything grows with love. I'll see you next time. Bye.